I know a lot of carpenters that install their jambs with a full-length level. They put it right up against the hinge jamb. They shim behind every hinge so that the jamb is perfectly straight and perfectly plumb, and then they fasten that jamb off at every single shim. When they swing the door shut, it fits perfectly. The gaps are ideal. If you're using that same technique, you might not be having the same results. You might be finding that the gap above your top hinge is really big, and the gap beneath your bottom hinge is really small, if there's a gap at all. And that's because the weight of the door is pulling on the top hinge. The top hinge is under tension, so it's pulling the door away from the jamb and increasing that gap, whereas the bottom hinge, exactly the opposite. It's under compression, so the door is kind of squeezing that hinge closed, and that's why you end up with no gap beneath that bottom hinge. Let me show you why that happens. Everybody thinks that residential hinges are the same, but they aren't. Look, see the gap between the leaves on this hinge? That's about 1/8 of an inch. And look, there's hardly any gap beneath the leaves on this hinge. That means the door swung on this hinge is going to be much closer to the jamb than the door swung on this hinge. And that's not the only problem. Look how much play there is in this hinge. The pin is narrower than the interior dimension of the barrels on that hinge, so it swings real easy and doesn't squeak, but the top hinge, being under tension, is going to pull on that hinge and open up the gap between the door and the jamb, whereas the bottom hinge, being under compression, is going to push on that hinge and reduce the gap. That's one big reason why you run into problems on residential doors. So you might be thinking, well, I don't use those inexpensive light-duty hinges on my jobs. I use a heavy-duty hinge, a thick one. Well, you might be surprised to find that even on this heavy-duty hinge, there's play between the pin and the knuckles on the hinge. Whereas on this one, there's none at all. So it really depends on the quality of the hardware that you're using. For instance, if you're spending big bucks and you're putting in M-Tech high-end hinges, they're this thick, they don't have any play in them at all. Nothing. And if you set your jamb and shim behind every hinge and fasten that jamb off rock solid, your door is probably going to fit perfectly.